All right, finally this week, guys, I want to take a quick look at the paragraph panel. All right, so character panel we use to choose our font and the size and spacing, all that kind of stuff. The paragraph panel is what we use to adjust some of the other formatting things we might need to do, like the alignment, whether it's justified text or not, and then indents and spaces before paragraphs and all that kind of stuff. We also have some interesting ways to add lines above or below paragraphs or do shading, that kind of thing. So again, this has another one of those expand and contract features. So if your paragraph panel looks like this, click on the upper right corner and go to Show Options. Okay, so I've added a little bit of formatting to my headline, but really nothing fancy. So if I just have a text frame selected, and this goes for the character panel as well. If you have your selection tool and you just have a text frame selected, anything that you apply over here is going to be applied to everything in that text frame. For example, if I click on Align Right, everything is going to be aligned right. All right. If I click on Center, everything is going to be center. If, however, if I double click, so I just have a cursor active, it's going to apply whatever I choose to that entire paragraph, but not everything else. So if I click on Right Align here, this paragraph is going to be right aligned, but everything else is going to be left alone. All right, so just know that if you have the container selected, everything's going to be edited, and if you have certain pieces selected, then only those pieces are going to be edited. All right. So as we have up here, the alignment, left, center, right aligned. The next set are justify. Now justify, you see a lot of newspapers. If I click on that, that's where all of the text ends at the same spot. And the program automatically adjusts spaces in between words to make sure that your text, each line ends at the same spot. Now this might seem like it's always a good idea, but depending on what your text looks like, it can cause some pretty weird looking spaces between your text and cause what's called rivers to show up in your text. That's these big white spaces in between that form these like rivers of white space going down. It's very distracting. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. All right. Then we also have this forced justify, which means even the last line of the paragraph. So now you can see some of these weird spaces coming through here. It's just not the best. It's not ideal. It's good if you have a lot of text. You don't have time to go through and manually adjust spacing, but in general, left align to right align is a little bit better. Then we also we can adjust based on the spine, which is where two pages would connect. Excuse me. Now, the next set down here, we have these little icons will do a good job of kind of visually explaining. This is going to be left indent. So whatever paragraph you have selected, or if you have the text frame selected, everything, you can adjust the left indent. And that's going to be in 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch. And then over here, this is the right indent. So that's going to be coming from the other side. All right. Then we have first line indent, if you'd like to indent the first line of your paragraph. And then last line indent. I've honestly never used that before, but I'm sure there might be a reason when you would need to. All right. I personally, this is just a personal preference. If you like to indent your paragraphs, that's fine. I generally don't. I usually add space between paragraphs, and that's what we do right here. We have space before and space after, and I use that a lot when I'm formatting text. If I adjust the space before or the space after, it gives me, that's how I kind of differentiate my paragraphs, but it's kind of up to you. I'm going to change this indent back. All right, so, and I use a lot of the space before to kind of separate my text elements too. So for example, if I have a headline and a subhead and I want a little space between them, I'll either use a little space before or a little space after. Then it starts to break up the paragraphs. So it's a nice way to really quickly format your text. Now, this next guy is pretty interesting. This is a drop cap. You've probably seen these in books or magazines, and that is where the first letter of a paragraph is much larger than the rest. So it kind of introduces you to the beginning of an article or a book or a chapter, whatever. So at 1, it's going to be 1 line. If it goes up to 2, you'll see that letter becomes 2 lines high, 3 lines high, 4 lines high, and so forth. So that's kind of a neat way to create a little visual interest within your paragraph. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to do it for every paragraph, but every now and again it looks pretty nice. And then sometimes you'll change this font or make it make it bold or something just to sort of create an entry point into the text. Now, you'll also notice that this gets really close. So this is where you start to combine character and paragraph panel. So for example, this is pretty tight, so I might put my cursor right there and then come over here in the character panel and adjust the kerning just to give it a little room to breathe. But that's a little, we'll get there. I just kind of wanted you to start to integrate these things. So back to the paragraph panel. This next one is the drop cap 1 or more characters. So by default, it's just 1 character. If you want it to be the whole word, you can do that. It gets a little weird there, obviously, but sometimes you want to do that. Now, moving down, we have shading. You have a little bit more control over this in the drop-down menu on the right, which we're going to look at. But if you check shading, it's going to highlight that entire paragraph and fill it with the background color, which then you can adjust over here. It has a shortcut to your swatches. All right. That's okay. There are better options, which I'm going to show you. So I honestly have never used that either. The hyphenate I do use quite a bit because you want to minimize the number of hyphenations that you have. I think the general rule is 1 hyphenation is okay for every 10 or so lines of text. However, if you look right here, I have 1, 2, 3 hyphenations with this dummy text. So either by selecting all my paragraph text or using the selection tool and just selecting this whole box, I uncheck hyphenate most times, and it will make sure that no words are hyphenated. Now, you can do this line by line in the character panel by going to no break, and it'll just do that 1 hyphenation. But I just usually do the whole paragraph. So anyway, now let's look at these menu options here. Don't worry about these up here. You can balance ragged lines, and it's going to try and kind of mix it up. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, to balance it out where the lines end. This is called the rag, where lines end. It creates this sort of ragged edge, and you don't want it to be too crazy, for some lines to end over here and others over here because it looks a little weird. But so you want to try and get that relatively consistent. Moving on down, we have justification, these kinds of things. Span columns, it comes in handy whenever we start introducing columns to our text and we want something to run all the way across those, like a headline. We'll come back to that later. Hyphenation. The things that I really want to show you here are the paragraph rules and the paragraph shading. We can also add bullets and numbering and customize those. But the rules are... those are lines before or after paragraphs. So for example, if I want let's say I want a line above my headline, all right, I would highlight the headline, come down here to paragraph rules, and I get this dialog box, and you see I can create a rule above or a rule below. In this case, I want it to be above, so I'm going to click on, and it doesn't look like it's above, but we have to adjust it. I can adjust the weight, the color, the type, meaning whether it's dotted or double or whatever, the color, and the offset is really what I want to go for. If I want to put that above there, and then we'll make it a little bit thinner, so 0.5 point. You can change the color. By default, it's the text color. You can also adjust whether it's indented from the edge, left or right, and if you want to keep it in the frame. Make sure you have preview checked so you can see what it looks like. Click OK, and that's what that would look like. Okay, so you can do that above or below. The other thing is we looked at shading right here, where if you have a paragraph selected and you click on shading, it'll do the whole thing. You have some more options from this upper right hand menu. If I click paragraph shading, click shading on, and then preview so I can see it. It's going to do the same thing, but then you can also adjust offsets here, make it bigger or smaller. You can choose whether it's the whole paragraph or whether it's just the text. So it gives you a few more options in this way if you want to do that. There are other ways to create color behind your text as well, which we'll learn in later lessons. But using a combination of the character and the paragraph panels, which once again are also up here in the control panel. So there's multiple ways to format, to access all the different tools that you need. But using a combination of those and a few other panels that we're going to learn about, you can have a lot of flexibility to really create text that looks any way you want it to.